Thank you for joining us. Today I am here with Julian.
Hey, how's it going? So we wanted to make this podcast for you guys to give you a little bit of history about how we got started and well, specifically it's how we got started on Kickstarter. And so one of the things I wanted to do today was talk with Paul a little bit about how we decided to start with Kickstarter. Knowing what we know now, would we take the same path in Kickstarter? What are some of the tactics that we use? So I just want to talk about some of that stuff to, share our experiences with using crowdfunding crowdfunding platforms, and more specifically Kickstarter.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, I'm Paul, and I'm the founder of Ace Marks, and Julian is our CMO and CTO, really, all at the same time. And so a lot of decisions that we made revolving crowdfunding, really, we look at it two different ways, right? There's always the product side, and then there's always the more technical marketing side of it. And you really need both to really have a successful campaign. And just considering those things, that's almost really just the beginning. And the reason that we even started, and we'll get into all those details in a second, but the reason that we even decided to use Kickstarter specifically and to go the crowdfunding route was that when I had created our first collection of shoes, I suddenly realized that getting people to try a new brand of shoes was not going to be the easiest thing in the world. I can launch a website, and that's great, and there's marketing that's involved there, and I was going to have to track people. People are going to have to start trusting us. And it just seemed like at that time it was 2000. Actually, originally it was 2015 when I made the decision to launch on Kickstarter, and then I spent the whole year studying Kickstarter. I transcribed every single Kickstarter video that was successful. I just wanted to see if there was some sort of formula that everyone was kind of following, the successful campaigns at least. So once we made the decision, or I made the decision at that point, it really had a lot to do with realizing that I didn't have a way to attract people to a website if I would launch one, other than some other digital marketing strategies. But I thought that what differentiated our Ace Marks and our product at the time, and even today, was the manufacturing process, like what we had as a team in terms of our capabilities, what our experience was in the industry. I really wanted to make it more of a transparent brand. I didn't want people to just be buying a shoe. I wanted people to be buying into our story, and also into the story of the product and the people that make the product.
And the quality of it, right? That craftsmanship and the experience it takes to make something that quality.
Exactly. And I was looking at Kickstarter, and I thought it was a cool way to kind of do all that at the same time, and also get people to really help us with the funding to buy our first production.
Right.
Because that's really the other big part of it, right? So, your new brand, you have maybe samples, but then you have to spend a lot of money, and that you can't just launch a website and expect people to pay you in advance for a shoe they're not going to ship within the next 24 to 48 hours. So Kickstarter really resolved that problem as well. So it helped us tell the story, get people to know what's going on behind the product, and then also give us the funding that we needed at the time to manufacture our first run of shoes.
Right. And so I actually joined the team was about a week before you launched the Kickstarter. So it was before the company had technically opened its doors in any way, shape, or form, even though it had been around for about a year. It was about a week before you decided that you wanted to launch the Kickstarter campaign. Yeah. And I remember when we first met, you were talking to me about how you wanted to do this on Kickstarter. And I personally had never run a Kickstarter before, but I liked the concept, and I always loved the idea of crowdfunding and wanted to be involved with one. So at the time, at the time, it really made a lot of sense, right? Because we were selling this product. It was, it's especially with men, it's hard. Some men can tend to be a little bit loyal to brands, especially, in fashion and certain things, but not always is open to trying new things. Yeah. So, and I thought this was a great way to get the exposure out there and get some initial customer base, which made sense. So at the time, the logic was really, it made a lot of sense to go forward with Kickstarter. I'm trying to remember some of the things that we were worried about with doing a Kickstarter, which a lot of people still have these concerns, which are copycat brands, right? And we ran into a lot of those experiences while we were running the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
we had a lot of
even today there's a bunch.
Yeah, especially when we started to have some numbers that were substantial, some successful numbers. Then we really saw people coming out of the woodwork trying, basically verbatim copying our slogans and
even our logo.
Our the way we did our page was just like a carbon copy, you can tell. So, and those are risks that you run when you're doing a Kickstarter campaign. So
another risk, the other concern, actually one of the biggest concern that we had, I remember, was that people are going to view this as a Kickstarter brand, almost like a fluke, right? If we succeeded, it was bad, and if we failed, it was probably just as bad.
Right, especially for a fashion brand, a high end fashion brand, like a very high quality product.
Yeah, because it was a very non-traditional approach.
Yeah.
To selling a high end luxury product. No one had really done it before.
Right.
To the level that we ended up doing it.
There was a few other shoe companies, but they were kind of like techie shoe companies in a way, where there was some new innovation, and they were usually generally pretty low priced.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much new ground to sell like a high quality fashion item on Kickstarter. And and then like you said, that's another thing. And a lot of times there's a stigma that people have with Kickstarters too, which is that the Kickstarters themselves, people are very scared that they're not going to be able to. People are very scared that they're not going to be able to deliver on what the actual campaign is. So a lot of people are, there's so many people have, started a Kickstarter, promoted it, they got their funding, and that's great. And then 4 years have gone by and people haven't gotten what they were promised to get. And there's a lot of people that's happened to. So there's a lot of negative stigma about someone starting on Kickstarter, that it's like, okay, are they actually going to deliver on what they said they were going to deliver?
And I think that's one of the things that's making Kickstarter harder and harder to be that platform that it was even 3 or 4 years ago to launch a new consumer product, because so many people have gotten burned. And I think we'll get to that in a little bit. But another point that you made was that idea that you actually have to deliver the product.
Right.
So a lot of people are really good at making videos. They can write a great script. Everything is beautiful, but they don't have a lot of experience creating the product. And that's where a lot of successful Kickstarters fail, right? There's 2 points where you can really fail. One is in actually even getting anyone to buy into your Kickstarter campaign. And then 2, on the delivery, because those people that bought into you and then you can't deliver, I mean, that's pretty much the end of your company there.
Right. If people are launching on Kickstarter, something that you have to consider is that these are entrepreneurs that might not have a lot of experience. Like, they might have a great idea and a great concept, and they have the best intentions in the world. Yeah. They just don't have the experience in logistics and shipping and warehousing and customer service. And there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of costs that they might not have foresaw when they said, okay, we need $1 million to make this, but turns out, guess what? I needed 1.4 to actually get it done. And well, you know what? That 1.4 means you can't bring it in from customs, or you can't get it out. You can't deliver it because you don't have the money to pay the shipping company. And then all of a sudden, there's so many ways where things can fall apart too. So,
and I think that's one of the advantages that we had. I have 15 years of experience in the shoe industry, in logistics, distribution, product creation, manufacturing. I ran the gamut. I've done everything. That was probably the easiest part for me, right? And that's when we started talking. When you joined initially, the hardest part for me was figuring out how to
drive the traffic.
How do we drive the traffic?
Right. How to get the exposure there, right? Which is what I knew very well.
Yeah. So I think that's what really. I mean, thankfully we're able to get one, drive that traffic, and we're able to get that point across that, hey, this is a new brand, this is a new product, and we're just launching it. But the people behind it have enough experience that we're going to be able to deliver this product, which is why I think we broke the record that first time around.
Yeah.
For a Footwear campaign.
Yeah. So that would definitely be something that anyone that's thinking about doing a Kickstarter, that's something, or any type of crowdfunding, I would definitely do what you can to try to make sure you do your research and do your homework, or even speak to someone that has the experience, like someone that has the type of experience that you have, to understand all those costs that they might not be able to foresee because they don't have the experience in it, where it would be extremely beneficial to make sure that they're setting their goals at that right number, so that they're actually going to be able to deliver what they promise. Because if you if you want to get your business started, there's other ways to do it than besides doing a crowdfunding platform. But one thing I can promise is, if you go on crowdfunding and you hit your goal and then you don't deliver, that is pretty much a death sentence for your company. So it's over.
And what's funny, people that reached out to us, after every campaign, we ran 3 different Kickstarter campaigns, and thankfully they were all very successful. After those campaigns, we'd get people that would reach out to us to help us, achieve some success at the campaign that they wanted to launch. And probably one of the biggest things in the conversations that I had, that I saw people were failing to understand, was that it's great, you understand how to manufacture, you made a great video, but you have to run that as if it's your own website. Kickstarter's not going to sit there and say, oh, wonderful, there's a new gadget on here, like let's get 1 million people to see this gadget and to start buying it. It's not how it works. You have to run it as if Kickstarter didn't really exist and you're running your own website. You have to drive your own traffic to it.
Right. That's a huge portion too. People think that the platform itself is what's going to make your sales and drive your traffic, but it does not work like that.
Or that your video is going to go viral for some reason automatically because the newspaper is going to pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. There is an added benefit that you get a little bit of an additional revenue that comes in on top of your marketing from the Kickstarter community of people that do shop on Kickstarter or do frequent quick Kickstarter. But that's not something that you can count on like that. That you need to establish yourself and build your own following on Kickstarter. And then once you have that, and once it's shown so that it has some legs and it's a campaign that people like and is getting more successful, then the people that frequent Kickstarter might jump on and be like, oh, this is exciting. Let me see what's going on. Oh yeah, I like that product. I wanna jump in on it. So it's definitely self-market. You have to market it yourself, and that's the way you're going to count on doing it. So yeah, that's an important factor also. And I guess since we're going to get into that, let's before we move off the initial, are you deciding to do a Kickstarter campaign? Before I do that part, let's figure out first. I think the first thing I want to figure out is whether you think that if you had a chance to go back and do it again, would you still launch Ace Marks on Kickstarter?
Today, maybe a little bit different, but at the same time and place that we launched Ace Marks, I don't think I would have launched it any other way. It gave us a lot of exposure. It gave us what I like to call brand enthusiasts, these guys that really have been with us for 3 campaigns or more, or even guys that started with us that first campaign, and they were super enthusiastic. They were there from the beginning. And to have like that loyal following that like really understands us and gets us and sees us as more than just a shoe brand, they see it as they almost see it as their part of the team, and really they are part of the team in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's something that's very difficult to get as quickly as we got it, and a lot of it had to do with Kickstarter.
Right. Yeah, and I think that Kickstarter is a great way to really deliver a very engaging message where you don't have those opportunities if you're doing just a basic website. No. I mean, people are in their e-commerce cycle, they're going to go, they're going to check out a product page. They're going to go to the landing page. Maybe they might skim through your About Us page for like 6 seconds. Whereas Kickstarter, there is a built-in, quest for information about the story, about the background. And it's really engaging to the customer base. So I think that there's a great opportunity when you do a crowdfunding campaign to deliver those engaging messages and build that loyal following base that knows your story and knows your background, and they feel a relationship with the company and the brand and the product that they wouldn't get if you didn't start on a crowdfunding campaign. So I think that is a huge advantage also.
Exactly. And I think it also opened my eyes. I really had no digital marketing, e-commerce, very limited experience doing any of this stuff before. And I think it made me kind of rethink, even though I already understood a little bit that I wanted Ace Marks to be different than what I was used to, which was traditional wholesale and licensing. It really made me understand like the power of building that one-to-one relationship with our customers and not just seeing them as like a number or the end consumer or just something kind of generic like that. I think one of the things that a lot of our customers end up being surprised when we do live streams, and we see a lot of these guys that we've known for 3 or 4 years, and we can call them out by name, like we know their shoe sizes, we know what they bought before. Yeah. And I think that also adds a lot of value to the relationship and to the interaction between us and our customers. So yeah. I think it changed the way that I see e-commerce direct consumer and the possibilities that are out there when you're building a brand like this. Yeah.
So okay. So now let's say you're moving forward with the decision. When we move forward with the decision to actually go do Kickstarter. There are certain things that you need to do prior to doing it, right? There's preparations in marketing. There's preparations in the way you do your page. So I wanted to talk about those, few of those factors first.
Well, before we even get to that, you have to decide what platform you're going to launch on, right?
Well, correct.
Because there are other options, not just Kickstarter.
Correct. And everyone listening, if you want to use Kickstarter, okay? So there is Indiegogo. Now there are certain limitations out there, right? So because depending on what type of product you're using, you might not be able to do on Kickstarter because of their policies. So obviously, with that being said, you might have to go with a different platform. But we've been on Indiegogo before, we've been on Kickstarter before, so we know a few of the platforms. And I mean, the base of followers of people that are on Kickstarter is just far greater than any other platform. Like when we did it with Indiegogo, we realized that outside of their newsletter, there was just no traffic coming to the page unless we drove it ourselves. Whereas with Kickstarter, obviously we needed to drive the traffic ourselves, but there was also a little bit of this Kickstarter community that the people that frequented Kickstarter that also added value to that. So if you want that added value, you're definitely going to want to go with Kickstarter in order to do that.
The one thing I'll say in Indiegogo's defense is that, we have a very particular product, a fashion product that traditionally is not seen as something that's easily sold online. And I think that there have been some products that have had success on Indiegogo more so than on Kickstarter, particularly tech gadgets and tech products. But in our personal experience, Kickstarter, broadly and more generally, tends to add more value to a campaign than we saw in Indiegogo.
Right. Yeah. That's my feeling about it too. Yeah. It could be different for different industries. Like I said, we did obviously the fashion in categories and Kickstarter. Yeah. So again, in the tech section, you might want to do your own research and talk to people that have experience in those to see what type of added value they have from there. Yeah. But I mean, in our personal experiences and with some other people that we've talked to also, they kind of have told us the same thing, that Indiegogo, like their newsletter definitely drives traffic. If you get included in their newsletter, then it's definitely, definitely drive some sales and drive some pledges. But aside from that, the marketing dollars don't go necessarily as far on Indiegogo. Yeah. So just there's a couple of things to keep in mind before doing that.
The marketing dollars are very important because as a brand, it's going to be very limited.
Yes.
I think an interesting story that I like to tell a lot is that originally my budget or our budget at that time, I don't know if you remember, but we went into it saying we're going to spend $2,500.
Right. $2,500.
And that sounded like a lot to me at the
time. That was a mistake.
In my mind, that was like $2,500. We're going to do this for 40 days. Oh, wow. Like that's going to go a long way.
We laugh about it, but these are entrepreneurs that are starting a business for the first time. Like that's realistically what people have to spend on this stuff. And,
that's what we had.
Yeah. But, one of the things that we did before we even spent marketing dollars really was we really leveraged our own networks.
Yes.
Right. I remember you going through and creating personalized email to like every single contact you've ever known your entire life.
Yes.
And sending an email out to everyone, letting them know what you were doing. And I think one of the references we used was 40-hour work week, right? They had an article there that we referenced on Kickstarter.
That's right.
Yeah, we had there. We followed some of their templates also. I think that it was talking about creating a personalized video where you're talking to the camera and addressing people. This was outside of your Kickstarter page, right? Yeah. We created a separate landing page where we sent an email that we sent people to land there first, and Paul would address them personally, like, hey, thank you so much. This is what I'm doing right now. This is my new product. I would love for you guys to check it out. If if you can't pledge or if it's not right for you, just share using the buttons below. And we had all the share buttons below to really optimize that and get the maximum amount of it. Yeah. And that was an initial kick that really helped out. It really helped that initial wave in that first day.
Yeah, and I think that's what got us to about our first goal in our first campaign was $20,000.
Yeah.
And we knew that in order to get, that plan really was trying to get to those $20,000 with our own network. I think we reached maybe $5,000 or $8,000.
Yeah.
Which was nice. We did that in the first few hours, and it helped a lot.
Yeah.
And that really helped us start getting a lot of that Kickstarter traffic to start buying into it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other traffic that we eventually drove, they saw, oh, well, it's not a campaign that's starting at zero, and we did hit that goal in 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely want to get into all the impulse factors and a lot of the factors that determine the success of a Kickstarter campaign. But before we do that, let's talk about the page itself, right? Because a lot of people, they decide they're going to do Kickstarter, but now they have to figure out how do I decorate this page? What do I put on this page? What kind of content do I put on this page? So I think that there's a lot of important information to go through there. So first and foremost, I want maybe Paul, you can talk about the video itself, because you had that video done before I came in. And I know you spent a lot of time working on that, and you had a couple different versions of that video, and you spent a lot of time researching other Kickstarter videos. And then on top of that, I want to talk about some of the content and the way you wanted to deliver the content. And then I'm going to get into after some of the factors that you need to consider when talking about conversion rates and making sure your product is an effective seller, in addition to delivering the content you want as far as brand identity and product message.
Yeah, so that video took me literally a year to make. I started making that video in the beginning of 2015, and we launched our first campaign February 2016. So that video went through 3 different versions. Like I said, I transcribed literally every single Kickstarter campaign that did over $100,000, and I tried to figure out more or less a formula, which I feel like I did get into some sort of a formula. And then I kind of followed that formula in creating that video and writing the script for it. And then I hired about 2 different video agencies, local ones, terrible.
Right. You ended up doing it yourself and it came out better.
Yeah, I ended up doing it all myself. I had at that time 0 experience shooting videos, 0 experience editing. I did hire someone to edit Lewis, which is still with us today.
Yeah.
But Lewis did end up editing it, and so that creating that video, I just wanted to make sure that the most important thing to me was showing the behind the scenes and the manufacturing process, because the final product, the pair of shoes, okay, that's wonderful. But what was really going to set us apart is people really understanding the quality, the craftsmanship, the people that are making the shoes, the way that they use their hands in making the shoes, the Italian, get a whole feel of the background of where the shoe came from, the products the materials that are being used in the shoes, the fact that it's a quality luxury product. And I think that today the conversation changing a little bit. Quality, obviously branding is important, but people are starting to understand that you can get quality and craftsmanship without necessarily paying for this big traditional legacy label. And I think that's the whole direct to consumer.
The D2C model.
Yeah, that's the whole model today. And 4 years ago at this point when we launched that video, that was the most important to me, to get that point across. Like, this is probably better quality than any of those major labels that you're paying $600, $700, $800 for. And this is why, because this is how we make them. This is the material that we put into it. These are the people making your shoes. And yeah, that was really the purpose behind that video. That's the point I wanted to get across. And I think that we did a pretty good job of it.
Yeah. And one of the things that you did when you did that, I think, which was important, was that, and if you really look at a lot of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns, they also follow this model, which is obviously you want to showcase your product and tell you want to tell, the quality behind it and the story behind it. But I think that one of the things that you do on crowdfunding campaigns is that you're trying to, when people back a crowdfunding campaign, they're not just buying a product like pre-order. That's not what it's about. What they're really doing is they want to hear the story of the company and who you are, and they want to back you.
Correct.
To get your idea off the ground and your concept off the ground or your product off the ground. The product that they're getting is a perk, right? Yeah. Like that's their perk for doing it. Really, they want to do. So when you create the content, don't treat it so much like you're trying to sell a product to these people. Sell your story. Yeah. Sell who you are and what you're trying to do and what you want to achieve. And then, it'll showcase the product even more, and I think it'll really communicate the message even more.
And that actually, we made, I think, 10 different versions of this video until we got to the final one. But some of the earlier versions, I showed it to my group of friends, and one of them is, at that time had a lot of viral videos that he had made, and he gave me probably the best piece of advice. And he said to me that these videos look like infomercials. And no one is understanding who's behind this. And ultimately, people, like you said, people want to back you, and you're not telling them who you are. So weaved into the whole story of the craftsmanship and the product, I weaved my story into it as well, right, and got people to know me and understand where I came from and why I'm doing this and how I'm making it a little bit different. And so that was probably the best piece of advice that I got during that process. Yeah.
And then as far as the rest of the page, I think that some of the other things that were done was very clear visualizations of the product, well-written descriptions of your background story, how what your product is, how you make it, and going forward also, how you can prove that you're going to do what you say you're going to do in delivering, right? That you have a clear path to being able to deliver, right? I think the biggest anxiety points that people have when on a crowdfunding campaign is, number one, is it going to be a good quality product? Number two, do I like what these guys are even doing or these girls are even doing? And number three is, am I going to eventually get this? Yeah. So I think that if you can answer those, if you can concentrate on answering those three major anxiety points that a customer would have, then I think that that's what you really want to try to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that we went back and forth a lot, even creating that first layout, is what's more important, right? What comes first, and how much are people going to be willing to read as they go down that page? Because the Kickstarter page, like, you don't really have too many options in how you lay things out. Yeah, it's like one big long scroll, and if you have a lot of products like we did, a lot of styles and colors, our page was very long.
Yes,
right. So I think that we ended up leading with first giving like a little bit of a summary, right? So kind of, if someone's not really going to be willing to read everything they have to say, it was like 4 or 5 sentences that, like, if you just read those first four or 5 sentences, you got an idea what was going on, right, and you don't really have to read everything else, unless you really want to dive deeper.
It was like an intro paragraph, right? That kind of like summarized the whole essay in a sense, like the whole page, and then it went back and like, okay, here's step 1, point A, B, C, D, E, exactly, and then after that, so it was like a quick recap of everything you're about to read. So the people that didn't scroll too far down, you got the gist of it, and then the rest of it was, if you want more detail, here's where you're gonna get more detail.
Yeah, and I think after that we went with product, right? Because we started thinking people are gonna want to get the gist of it, and then some people just want to shop, like, show me the shoes.
They want to see the shoes, right?
They want to see the shoes,
right? Yeah.
So that's kind of how we laid it out. And it ended up working well for us.
Yeah, and I think people really engage with the content that way. And we saw that it did do that. Like some people only read the first paragraph and some people read it, but it worked for everybody because everyone got the gist of what they were looking for. So there was something for everybody there. So the other part I want to talk about for this is actually going into making sure that your website has some basic things that I think are important for, that a lot of people do in e-commerce that helps people make that decision to actually back you or purchase or whatever. And there are things that I call the 4 impulse factors, which a lot of people you'll know what they are if you're not familiar with the 4 impulse factors. You've probably seen it if you've ever seen an infomercial. When you're watching an infomercial, you see the 4 boxes, the 4 little corners, and each one has a different message, right? The top left will have 400 people have bought this product so far, right? That's called the Jones effect. It's everybody's doing it, therefore you need to do it. In the top right corner, you'll see a countdown that has only 30 minutes left before you can do this, right? That's your sense of urgency. And then you'll have another in the bottom left corner. It only says only 2 left in stock, right? That's your FOMO, your fear of missing out. And the 4th one is the impulse factor. That's not used very often, but it can be one of the most powerful. It's called indifference, right? We don't really care if you buy this or not. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Apple does a lot of this, right? It doesn't matter if you're a part of our community. Great, you get it. If not, well, we don't need you. It's okay. So indifference, and that one's a little tricky to use, and not necessarily something you have to have. I think personally, the one that I think is the ones that I think are the most important are the Jones effect, the fear of missing out, and the sense of urgency. So you want to make sure that your page clearly communicates these things. And Kickstarter obviously does that naturally because it's a campaign that has a date limit, right? There's only a certain amount of days this campaign is active, right? Mm-hmm. So right away, you're already seeing your sense of urgency, your fear of missing out. One of the things that we did with our reward system is that we have the early bird rewards, right? That are a little bit better value. And those rewards were limited. Yeah, and there was only a limited number that you can do on the reward system. So as as people are shopping, they're seeing these rewards go away, and so they really want to jump in and get those rewards before they're out. So there's a lot of things like that that people they want to do it, but they're just hesitant because whatever. I'm hesitant to make decisions. I need more time. But those little things drive that force to say, hey, you know what? I am going to do this right now because I don't want to miss out, or you know what? There's too many people doing this, and I want to jump on that train. So those impulse factors are very important for really taking that conversion rate from and I'm the analytical guy. So from that 1% or 1.5% to the 2.5% to the 3%, where you're going to double your marketing return, which is really important.
Yeah, and actually, those sense of urgency, right? It doesn't even have to be like, for example, the different reward levels that we had. There wasn't even really that big of a difference generally. No. I mean, price was an issue, but it was a $5 or $10 difference.
Right.
In some cases, in later campaigns, I think the difference was that we'd add a few more products,
a little more accessories,
like
a few little bonus items for free. Yeah,
exactly. And all that makes a difference. It's all incremental, and people just want to get more stuff. They want a better value, even if it's just a few dollars.
Yeah.
And so you really have to look at it. Sometimes. You see companies giving away a lot of product or giving a huge discount to create that sense of urgency, and obviously the more you can give, the better. But when you're on a tight margin or on a tight budget, you don't necessarily have to go negative and go into the red in order to be able to accomplish that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So okay, now that we have the page pretty much laid out,
yep.
Let's get into, I guess, next step would be some of the marketing that we did in the beginning. So when it comes to Kickstarter. You only have a 40-day campaign, right? Or it depends. You can set your own time, but generally campaigns are around 40 days. So when you're talking about something that only is going to last 40 days, you don't have a lot of opportunity for like branding type campaigns, right? And so when you're thinking about what type of marketing you're going to do or what to invest in to get people over to your site, if you start thinking about channels that are going to be like branding types, where the concept of branding is you're going to be exposing people to your product a lot, so that when they have the intent, they think of you first, right? Whereas in direct marketing, you're trying to hit people at a point of intent and showcasing your product so that there's a direct channel back to your website, landing page, whatever, so that they have opportunity to buy. So one of the things we wanted to focus on was direct marketing, right? Here's
instant gratification.
Yeah, instant gratification, right? So an email newsletter, working with an influencer that could directly send traffic. And when we did work with influencers, it was, for us, obviously the YouTube worked more. It was people that directly spoke to people and could deliver the message of, hey, go check this out right now. There's this going on. The link's in the description. Make sure you check this out right now. So, and if you're deciding what type of marketing to do, I would say just make sure that there's always a clear call to action and there's a clear path to get to the objective. And then your page can then achieve the objective of getting them to back you and, delivering your story and get them to back you. If it's like, oh, I'm going to show your product in my post and they'll see the name of it, and the whatever that's too indirect. That's too indirect. There needs to be clear paths, clear links, clear clicks, a clear path to being able to purchase. So I think that's important in that factor.
And I think that's it just in that vein, right? I think a lot of people have this misconception that they have this greatest product ever. They're going to launch a Kickstarter campaign and every newspaper in the country is going to pick it up.
Yes, that does not happen.
It doesn't happen. And it may have happened in the early days of Kickstarter or crowdfunding when it was more of a novelty and it was a cool thing to write about. And maybe that would help you with your marketing. And some of those early Kickstarter campaigns that did a few $1 million, like supposedly they didn't spend almost anything in marketing. They just happened to go viral, got picked up by a bunch of different news outlets, and it went great for them. But even in 2016, and I'm sure it's even worse. Actually, I know that it's even worse today.
Yeah.
No one wants to write about a Kickstarter campaign because one of the reasons so many people have gotten burned. So nobody, the New York Times is not going to take a risk on their reputation and do that for you. So you really have to consider that even though you can get, you're not going to get traditional PR, but paid sponsorships, right? You may still be able to get some of those media outlets, online media outlets to help you out with your campaign, but you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're gonna have to do a lot of convincing because even if you come willing to pay, they're very hesitant to even come talk to you if you're a part of a crowdfunding campaign because so many people have been burned by crowdfunding campaigns that they don't want to direct their traffic and their visitors and ruin their reputation by delivering people to or suggesting people go see a crowdfunding campaign that they may not even get their products. Yeah.
Even in our third campaign, it's got more and more difficult. Even though we had this track record of delivering credibility. It got more and more difficult over time for us to get into a lot of those outlets that we had been in before even. Yeah,
that's the Kickstarter stigma. Yeah, right. So many people have been burned on it that people just don't want to even mention the word Kickstarter because there's a negative connotation with it. So you're gonna see that when you're trying to do your ad buys, you're gonna have that problem. And for most people, I think most people, the way that they've traditionally done their Kickstarter marketing is through a lot of SEM, which is your Facebook ads, stuff like that, and they're running those Facebook campaigns. So. Yeah,
and there's another pitfall there, right? There's lots of agencies out there that that specialize in Kickstarter marketing, crowdfunding marketing, and unfortunately, there's probably more scammers out there trying to take advantage of people that are trying to launch a new product in the Kickstarter campaign than there are reputable ones. In our experience, unfortunately, we did get scammed a bunch of times. But thankfully we did find a few also that are good to collaborate with, and there's probably just a handful of them, and some of them are bigger names, which become pretty obvious if you're doing any research on the topic. But it's something they really have to be careful with, and especially if you don't have a big budget, if you're only coming into this with a couple $1,000s, you don't want those couple $1,000s to go to some scammer in the middle of nowhere, which again did happen to us multiple times, but thankfully it did happen after. We started seeing some success, and we started funding the campaign with some Amex cards at that point.
Yeah, but funding is important. You only have so much funding, so you want to make sure it goes to the right spot. Right. So I think another important factor too is you want to really make sure that you get off to a good start. I think that's really important. I think the first 24 hours of Kickstarter can tend to be really important. People want to see a campaign that was funded very, very quickly.
And that affects your conversion rates, right? Because after you start spending money to drive traffic to your campaign, if people come to a campaign that's not funded, there's forgetting what you're selling, forgetting how you're selling it, forgetting whether or not you're reputable. There's that question, wait, am I going to pay for this today? I'm not going to get it for X amount of months from now. Is this even going to happen? Am I wasting my time here? They haven't even reached their funding goal.
Right. And this plays into Jones effect, right? Everybody's, a crowdfunding campaign that's funded in 24 hours. That means everybody's getting on it, and it's exciting and it's new, and the fact that everyone's being a part of it makes you want to be a part of it. So that's a really important, like you said, conversion rate. That's one of the impulse factors that's going to affect conversion rates.
And it was kind of really cool to see, right? When there are certain campaigns also, in our experience, it's in the beginning and at the end where you see the most conversion and you see the most people jump onto the campaign. In that middle part, it's almost like a dead zone where it's not really moving too much because there's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of excitement on a new launch. There's no sense of urgency that it's ending tomorrow. So people are kind of taking their sweet time. And during that middle portion is when you start seeing a lot of people drop the campaign as well, because if they join in the first couple of days, 24, 48 hours, and the campaign just blasts off, it's exciting to be part of that. But once that excitement starts dying down, the people are there just to get that rush, kind of start dropping off. And so it's kind of like as a brand and as a creator, you're trying to keep people on and you're trying to acquire people, and then it's kind of frustrating to see, you got 10 new people on the campaign, but you lost 15 of them. And so just that whole middle part is kind of...
Well, the middle part's almost like more about engagement, right? Keeping your existing supporters, people that have supported you, keeping them engaged, keeping them sharing, keeping them, in the keeping the comment section active.
Yeah.
So I think that all that stuff, the engagement portion is very important. And I think we talk about some of your tactics that you use during the engagement portion, because I remember during the first Kickstarter campaign, those videos with that landing page is something that we did almost on a weekly basis with updates.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's back then there was no Kickstarter Live either. Kickstarter Live, I think, came about first in 2017.
Right. It wasn't until our second one that we got to Kickstarter Live. Right.
Yeah. So we did a lot of, we'd spend a lot of time filming, just me talking, just giving an update, in addition to sending out a written update. But we also wanted to show our face, essentially. Did it just want to be like these people hiding behind some piece of writing? And then by the second campaign, Kickstarter Live came around, and we just kind of started to experiment. So not only did we go on it ourselves to talk to our backers, we also started experimenting with bringing on other people that can bring some added value to our backers.
Yeah.
We had that one great live stream out of a local tailor shop.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did the collaboration with Doroco Eyewear, Sebastian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brothers and Brawlers, we did it. And that was great. I think we had like 800 people on that live stream,
that was
like
exciting.
at all times.
Yeah.
And people were asking questions. People were, trying. With what we do is people, we have bolder shoes, and so dressing a black or brown shoe is common knowledge. But when you're dressing a blue shoe or a shoe with some green in it, then it becomes a little bit more difficult. So we kind of understood that and wanted to make sure that we're engaging our audience, our backers, by adding that value and bringing on other people. Was it the second or the third campaign? I think it was the third campaign. We even collaborated with like Antonio Centeno. Like he came out to one of our live streams.
That's right. Yeah. I think that was during the third one, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just kind of tried to keep it like fresh and got a little bit more creative with the different channels that were available to us. And I think Jose from Teaching Men's Fashion was on one with us.
Yeah, that's right. Jose did one with us.
Yeah. We had Antonio from Real Men, Real Style. So just for us, it's been about experimenting and just figuring out different ways that we can add value to our audience. And I think in this last campaign, which was off of Kickstarter, which we'll probably get to in a little bit, we had our stylist. Our stylist has Lena, who's been with us for, she's styled all of our campaigns except for one at this point. Yeah, and she's got some big clients personally that she works with, and so she was there to answer our backers' questions about style. So that's really how we drove a lot of the engagement. Obviously we're always pretty active in the comment section, which is also something pretty cool about these campaigns. It creates, you have these spaces where the intention, it's kind of like a prefabricated to create these points of engagement with your backers, and it's something that you need to use. Yeah. Is to go off on a little bit of a tangent. I know someone that called us up and asked for advice in how to run their campaign, and one of the biggest pieces of advice that we gave them was they need to be engaging. Right? It's not just about launching, hitting your goal, and then just disappearing. This person hit their goal within, I think, 7 days, but then just disappeared.
Didn't make any effort to talk to the supporters, keep them engaged, continue on the comments.
No updates were sent until like the very end of the campaign.
Yeah.
And the goal was hit, which was great. It was a low goal, but probably that campaign could have been so much bigger, at least triple the size if there would have been some engagement.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so that's a really huge piece of it. And that's really what Kickstarter is there for, just to launch your product, but also to create those brand enthusiasts early on.
Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely. And engagement is a huge portion. Just make sure I would say every single comment that went on that board, we responded to within a day, at least, like trying not to be more than a day. Yeah. So, and I think that was really important because it kept the community very engaged, and it kept everything very positive. There wasn't uncertainty about what we were doing or what we were up to, which I think puts a lot of people at ease. And then new people coming in read the comment boards and they see all this uncertainty. They're going to get hesitant. They're not going to want to back you. So again, that's just one of the anxiety points that people have is, what are these guys going to do, and are they going to deliver on what they said they're going to do?
Yeah, and on the back end, that's really easier said than done, because if your campaign is successful, especially, you all of a sudden have a couple thousand people that are trying to engage with you, right?
Yeah.
And you're just a one-man show or a two-man show.
Yeah.
We're literally up 24 hours a day at some points.
Those campaigns were very long days. It was very long days. It was, negotiating marketing stuff during the day and answering comments at night. Exactly. It was nonstop.
And it was just us. Like messages, emails would start coming in. And at the same time, we're starting to plan production, getting everything ready on that end, starting to think about logistics. And frankly, one of the most, I remember probably when we hit like $200,000 or $300,000 in our first campaign, all of a sudden I had this realization, holy crap, wait, this is a lot of shoes that we're going to have to deliver individually to a lot of people at the same time. How are we going to do that? And that's coming from a person that had a lot of experience in the logistics side. It's still all of a sudden felt like this monumental task. I have 2,000-3,000 people emailing us that we have to deal with all the time.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
So,
right. So, and so obviously, we've done 3 Kickstarter campaigns. And one thing I want to touch on real quickly is why we did 3 Kickstarter campaigns. Yeah. So after the first Kickstarter campaign, we obviously had a nice, we had a following that we were able to deliver the first production. We were able to get a following. One of the things that we realized was that it provided us a lot of data and insight, especially when it comes to shoes where there's so many size variations and we had so many styles and you don't know what people like or what you don't like. I mean, you have your personal opinions, but you don't know if that's what the masses are going to like. Whereas, when you do Kickstarter, you're doing this all on pre-order. So you can give people a lot of options. They can choose what they like, and they're basically telling you this is what you need to make and this is what you don't need to make because this is what people want. And, these are the sizes that we are. You can have access to a lot of data that you wouldn't be able to get if you were doing this cold, where, if you had to place your first inventory purchase and you didn't know this stuff, you could make one wrong, inventory purchase, and then all of a sudden you're stuck with a bunch of products you can't sell, and then your company's dead in the water.
That's right. You have a lot of cash sitting in the warehouse.
Yeah. So like that data was super valuable for us, and that's something that we wanted to keep doing going forward. So when we made new lines, we would have that same data. So we continued going forward with that model. And I think a lot of the customers like that model also, because essentially what it allowed them to do is it allowed them to get these shoes, really high quality product at such a low rate. Yeah. And we were able to do that because of this inventory risk that we didn't have, where we had to, guess what you wanted. And then we might have some left over that we'd have to add on to the price. Like that's what a lot of the other D2C companies do, which is something that we don't do, which is another reason why we're, even lower than a lot of the D2C companies. And that concept was something that I think a lot of people liked, and we continued to do it. And even after now, we did 3 Kickstarters, and now we're not on Kickstarter at all now. But we still continued with the same concept of a spring campaign where it's, we're going to show you a whole new line and you can pre-order it for production real soon. And we wanted to keep that going because a lot of people are really, they really like that concept, which is kind of a new way of shopping, even in a D2C model. You have to be a little bit more patient and be okay with maybe a 3-month wait time. But if you are, the value is going to be there. It's going to be a tremendous, it's a completely different way of shopping.
Yeah. And actually on the business side, not having that inventory risk, usually nowadays it's almost a cliche, like direct to consumer, you cut out the middleman. You don't have this overhead of retail stores and a lot of that legacy infrastructure that direct to consumers really here to solve. But you still have that inventory risk. And we were able to cut that out as well. And that's why we're probably the highest quality pair of shoes that you can buy at that $300 and $200 price point out there, because we're able to substantially reduce our inventory risk. We barely have to account for dead inventory, because when we buy something that's a new product or new style, we have that advantage that we're able to put it out there to our audience, understand what people actually want, and then produce that, right? And everything else is great, and we put it out there, and some people get it. It's really a limited edition, a limited run product that people are never going to have again. So it's really a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about a little bit about life after crowdfunding. So where we are now, and obviously we talked about that we continue to do this model, but once someone is done with crowdfunding, what are some suggestions that you might give to them when starting their business, or how to transition from crowdfunding into their business?
Yeah, transitioning from crowdfunding into the world of non-crowdfunding, it really depends, right? It could be, like for example, in our experience, we did end up going out and raising a small round afterwards. And that stigma that we were a little bit concerned with, that we were going to be seen as a Kickstarter brand, we came across that a lot, because people almost discount the fact that we were on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It's like that revenue doesn't even count.
Yeah.
Very few people saw it as an advantage, which is what we kept on doing now outside of Kickstarter. We run our own crowdfunding campaigns on our own platforms. And I think people are starting to realize more and more, like, hey, like, it's not like a fluke. Like, we do have that audience and that credibility where we can create a product. People feel safe in ordering with us, even though that's 2 or 3 months out. And that's a big advantage. But transitioning to life after Kickstarter outside of that can be a little bit daunting, right? Because now, like, our strategy has to change. Like, everything, like Julian said earlier, it was instant gratification. Like, we're always thinking, like, how are we going to generate sales in 30 days? But now we have to play a little bit more of a long game. And we always kind of had that component as well. So we really try to look at things, any marketing buys that we do, like, what kind of long-term benefit does it have for us? And then also what kind of short-term instant gratification benefit it has for us. And so we were very specific in making buys that kind of give us both as much as possible. But now we have to really focus a lot more on that long tail, while still taking care of the short term. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a change.
Yeah, definitely. And there was definitely a negative connotation. Like, some people, not everyone, very few actually, but there were some people that were like, oh, they're a Kickstarter company. They're not a real shoe brand. It's a little bit of almost like a gimmick that people thought of us as, which wasn't the case. And we've proven that it's not the case. But that was a stigma that we kind of had to shake off. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we wanted to move away from Kickstarter also after year 3. Another big part of it too, I think Kickstarter is going in a different direction also. I think now recently with the CEO just resigning, right? Yeah. Recently, Perry Chen.
Just learned about that today.
Yeah. So we had noticed that too, especially on our third Kickstarter campaign, is that we weren't getting the placements that we got before. Like, we would be, I think in the first, 24 hours we would do, we would raise $200,000. We'd have like 1,000 backers. And we were nowhere in in great traffic. And we were nowhere in the what's hot or what's trending or any of those sections. And, whereas our first campaign and our second campaign, we did see that. And it wasn't until, basically 2017 on, which is when I think this guy pretty much took over, right? This guy, Perry Chen.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, we saw a shift in what Kickstarter was doing.
Yeah.
And we saw that if you weren't some type of if you didn't have like a basically, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like a certain type of campaign that was getting featured. And they were definitely favoring things that really shared like their certain types of values that they held to be their values, right? And not to knock that, I think that's a good thing. Like they had a clear vision of what was important to them, and they wanted to support those causes, which I think is good. But as a business person, you have to take that into account when you consider whether to do Kickstarter or not. That will affect your revenue if they're going to choose, regardless of your success or how popular your campaign page is. If they're not going to expose you to their following, that's something you need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and we saw in that third campaign that it just became almost like diminishing returns. Like, such a small percentage of the revenue that we generated on Kickstarter in that third campaign was a result of that amplification effect that Kickstarter gave us. It was more and more just traffic that we had been driving to the campaign.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we're realizing that, we're also giving up a percentage to Kickstarter. Plus we have this, this potential stigma that's related to being a Kickstarter brand. So that's kind of why we decided that, we're going to give it a shot on our own, and kind of have more control. The other thing about it is that, as a footwear brand and apparel brand, how quickly we get the information to our manufacturing partners really dictates how quickly our customers are going to get that product. And it's very hard for us to manufacture ahead of time because we deal with sizes, with colors. It's not like we have a watch and we know we can safely order at least 2,000 pieces. And then we just have to make another 1,000 pieces once we actually get the information. So we have to be very specific while we're placing orders. And Kickstarter doesn't actually, and this is another thing most people don't realize, once the campaign is over, you know nothing, right? You have an email address and the amount of money that they gave you.
Yeah.
Kickstarter does have a very basic survey platform where you can, if you have one product that you're selling, you can use it. But if you're selling a product with variables like color, size, or multiple products, it's not a very efficient, or it's almost impossible to really use that platform. So you have to go third party. Yeah. And so that whole process of getting the information from Kickstarter takes 3 to 4 weeks. Then plus, building your platform, and plus getting people to actually respond to your requests.
And there's costs associated with that also.
Yeah, which we can get into also. But that becomes at the very least a 60-day process, 2-month process, which is 60 days, more lead time or less time that you have for manufacturing.
Right.
So now with our own platform, we're able to, with this past campaign in 2019, We launched our campaign March 18th. We were done by April, I think like 24th or 25th.
Yeah.
And by like April 30th, our factory had the orders in hand.
Exactly.
So
that was us building our own form of a crowdfunding platform.
Yeah,
our own pre-sale platform.
Exactly.
Yeah, we didn't have to wait for all these loopholes that you have to go through when you do a crowdfunding campaign. But not everyone obviously has that option. We didn't do that until our 4th year.
Correct.
We kind of had a foundation, and we had the financing in order to build that type of platform ourselves. So
and the credibility that people are actually going to trust us with their money.
Correct.
They know they're going to get it. You can't just launch something like that and expect to do $400,000 on that.
Correct. Exactly. So that's a big portion of it also.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in summary, I mean, I would, if we had to do it again, I definitely would do Kickstarter again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it was it is a great place to really get exposure. I mean, I think that there are certain limitations. If your product is very easily copied, and getting to market first is super important for you, then I probably wouldn't do Kickstarter because copycatting is a big issue.
A lot of horror stories around that.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror stories around that. So there are certain things that I definitely would consider your product, but I think that if you're just looking a way to test your product and get proof of concept, I think it's a really great resource, and I think there's a ton of great information out there on different tips and tactics to use when launching your Kickstarter. So it definitely comes with my recommendation of some things to try and things that I would do again if we had to do it over again.
Yeah, I agree, and from again creating this brand awareness and getting this global audience, because another big thing that we saw, which I actually didn't expect when we started, was that only 60% of our backers in that first campaign, actually even the following campaigns, were from the US or North America. We started building this audience internationally. We actually ended up shipping to more than 80 different countries. 40% of our backers were international, which created its own logistics issues. But you can't get that kind of exposure pretty much anywhere else that I know of that quickly, and build that credibility and that confidence in your company and your brand and you guys and your team personally.
Yeah, definitely.
Outside of crowdfunding. So it's definitely a good experience. The game has changed a lot. The landscape has changed. So it's not as easy as it was 3 or 4 years ago if you're a consumer product launching on a platform like Kickstarter. But there aren't that many better options, especially if you'd be served well to get some data ahead of time, whether or not people even want your product before you invest X amount of money into inventory.
And if you have variations, which parts of your product, and it can be even something as simple as colors, you know what I mean? Like sometimes a color can make the difference if people want your product or not, right? Even it can be that simple. Yeah. But that's a great place to test it out. I give people a few options, hold a survey during it. Hey, we had this product, but what do we think about blue, yellow, or green? What do you like? Which one do you like? And then all of a sudden, hey, everyone just wants this. We should just change everything to be the blue. And all of a sudden now it sells better, right? Yeah. So it could be something as simple as that. So yeah,
it's a great place to validate your product, validate whether or not there's a market for what you're trying to sell. Yeah, and get some early traction.
Definitely.
So yeah, I would do it all over again. But I'm really happy that we're able to get that opportunity 3 or 4 years ago when we started it, and it was a little bit more conducive to consumer products. Yeah, than it is today.
Definitely. Okay, well, this has been a little bit of background about our Kickstarter story, why we did it, more information about it. This is the CEO Roundtable podcast that Paul and I are going to be doing hopefully more on the regular, just to provide some business concepts, and hopefully we'll be able to get some good guests and talk to some interesting people about all different facets of business, from entrepreneurship to, different types of financial news. We want to cover a little bit of everything and get interesting people on. So hopefully we'll see you guys again soon.
Yeah, we want to try and go deeper, right? Get a little bit more behind the scenes story, a little bit of a longer format, something they can't just do in like a 30-second video clip on social media these days. Yeah. And we know that just based on the emails that we get, people want to know a little bit more and get a little bit more personal. And we hope to do that not just with ourselves, but also with, like Julian said, a lot of cool guests that we have lined up.
Yeah, definitely. All right, thanks guys. See you next time.
Thank you.